On this edition of Battleground, more headaches for Georgia Republicans as Donald Trump continues his years-long feud with Governor Brian Kemp. What voters are saying about this and what could an intra-party fight mean in November? We'll head to Atlanta for the latest. Plus, Republicans for Harris? It sounds inconceivable, but a group of disaffected Republicans right here in Pennsylvania has started a campaign to enlist like-minded GOP voters to support the vice president. We'll look into how this could affect the race here and how two other swing states factor into this. Then, election security in North Carolina. What state officials are doing to calm fears about a range of voting issues and why both parties see access to the ballot as a key issue in this race. I'm Cupp, and with 83 days until the election, this is Battleground.
Now in Pennsylvania, I have great relationships. In Georgia, I do too, but unfortunately not with the governor. I've never understood it. When you get somebody elected, they're supposed to like you. He's not exactly, for some reason, and you'll have to ask him about that. Yeah, I'd love to see it get repaired.
To the dismay of many Republicans in Georgia, Donald Trump's continued attacks on Governor Brian Kemp have not subsided. In fact, the former president seems to be doubling down on his belief that Kemp and other elected Republicans in Georgia cost him the 2020 election. This against the backdrop of another bombshell story out of the Peach State. The Georgia Election Board wants to relook at the results of the 2020 election in Fulton County. Stop me if you've heard this story before. For more on so much going on in Georgia, I'm so pleased to be joined once again by Russ Spencer, Fox 5 Atlanta. Russ, good to see you.
It's good to see you, SC. Thanks.
All right, we'll get to the Trump-Kemp dust-up in just a minute. But first, Donald Trump has been leading in Georgia for most of this race. Tell our viewers, has the race changed there with Kamala Harris replacing Joe Biden?
Oh, my goodness, it's changed on a dime. I've never really seen anything quite like it in my television and political career. Trump was up by 5 for almost the entire year. That has turned on a dime in the last month. Now it's essentially a toss-up. And to know that, all you have to do is follow the money. The Trump campaign bought ads, $37 million worth of ads last Friday, and almost 24 million of those ads will be spent here in Georgia. So you know that they think that the campaign is here in earnest. And the Harris campaign also spending a lot of money. The Cook Political Report had Georgia lean Republican, along with Arizona and Nevada. Now it's a toss-up state, according to them. And let's look at what may have been, what may still be, former President Trump's strongest issue, the economy. He was leading Joe Biden by 14 points in terms of who people trusted on the economy. According to the latest polls with Vice President Harris, that's now down to 6 percentage points. So It's a brand new ballgame.
Wow. Okay, Russ, well, I can't believe we're still talking about this, but it's still on the front page of the paper there almost every day. Tell us the latest in Donald Trump's war of words with your governor, Brian Kemp, and why Trump seems to be doubling down on this.
It really is kind of hard to believe. The soundbite that you played where he's saying, you would think he would like me. We don't have much of a relationship. Donald Trump takes some credit for Governor Kemp's election here back in 2018 for getting him the Republican nomination. And that there's some truth to that. But that's long past. Now, Donald Trump needs Governor Kemp because he is the most popular Republican candidate, the most popular Republican politician, I should say, in the state, with an approval rating of something like 61%. Now, you know, the former president is upset with Kemp because he said earlier this year that he did not vote for Trump in the primary, that he didn't vote for anyone. The primary was essentially settled at that point. His wife, the First Lady Marty Kemp, admitted that Trump hasn't earned her vote and that she wrote in her husband's name. Now, at the rally here at Georgia State a couple of weeks ago, as a consequence of all of that, Donald Trump called him a bad guy, said he was disloyal, said he didn't want their endorsements. And I spoke to a very plugged-in Republican operative just after that rally, and he called it insane, indefensible, and self-destructive. Let's think, the former president, when he was in office, he didn't get along too well with Kim Jong-un. Then they exchanged some letters, and he said they fell in love. I am not a political operative, but it certainly seems like this would be a very good time for Donald Trump to fall in love with Brian Kemp because he's got the strongest organization. He can get out the vote. He says he wants Trump to win, and he's willing, even now, he's told donors, to give him his organization to try to help him win Georgia. But for now, at least, it doesn't seem that the former president wants to take advantage of that potential relationship.
I mean, and you mentioned he's super popular, Brian Kemp. So this obviously seems like a bad idea, and we know Republicans are mad, but do you think this story is having an impact on voters there, or is this sort of like an insider story?
Well, that's a really good question, SC. And of course, this little tiff between Donald Trump and Brian Kemp is not top of mind for Georgia voters.
Yeah.
They're more concerned about the economy. They're more concerned about inflation and immigration. But the margin of victory 4 years ago was 11,779 votes.
Right.
So he can't afford to lose any of those votes.
That's right.
And certainly there'll be some people who may have some questions about the former president. Plus, we have proof that it is not a political winner here in Georgia. 2 years ago, Donald Trump encouraged David Perdue, the former senator, to run for governor against Brian Kemp because he was so irritated about what happened in 2020. And Perdue went along. Yeah. And basically, the reason for being of his candidacy was to say that the 2020 election was rigged. And he lost to Brian Kemp by 52 points. So it's not a political winner.
No.
Are there Georgians, Republicans, who believe that the 2020 election was stolen? Absolutely. No question about it. Are there enough of them to help you carry a statewide race? Apparently not.
Well, that's what I want to ask next. Speaking of old wounds, and I can't believe we're still talking about this story either, but the Georgia Election Board has decided to take up the case of the 2020 election in critical Fulton County, which of course includes Atlanta. What can you tell us about that?
Well, this is just a reflection of the former president's preoccupation with the 2020 election. This state election board is supposed to be nonpartisan. Democrats are questioning whether that's the case right now. They're going to revisit, specifically in Fulton County, a question about whether 3,000 votes were counted twice during one of the recounts in the time after the 2020 election. The person who heads that board, it's a 5-person board, was appointed by Governor Kemp, and he has said this has been investigated, it's been litigated, let's drop this. But he was outnumbered by 3 people who are, let's just say it, loyal to President Trump. In fact, President Trump mentioned them by name during his rally at Georgia State, including one named Janice Johnston, a retired obstetrician, who stood up in the second row and received the applause of the crowd. So, what's happening is they're going to look into whether these 3,000 votes were counted twice.
Yeah.
It's not going to change anything because it wouldn't have been enough to change the election anyway.
Well, Russ Spencer, Fox 5 Atlanta, I hope next time we talk, it's about some different stories. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay, up next, a group of Republicans here in Pennsylvania has started a campaign to support Kamala Harris. Why that matters and what other swing states are they targeting? Battleground will be right back.
What are your thoughts on the 2024 presidential election?
My thoughts are it is a hot mess.
It's not even between a rock and a hard place because there's clearly a superior candidate, and it's Harris. She's eloquent, she's smart, she knows what she's talking about.
I think it's very important to pay attention to politics and what's going on.
It's like coin flip for me. Like, I don't know what to do because, like, I didn't vote back in 2020.
Who'd you vote for in 2020?
Donald Trump.
Okay. If the election were going to happen today, who are you going to vote for this time?
Kamala Harris.
I've always been Republican, but I can't tolerate Trump and his negativity. He's just brought so much hate into this country.
Welcome back to Battleground. Some moderate Republicans here in Pennsylvania are now part of a group called Republicans for Harris, which was started by the Harris campaign. Their numbers aren't large yet, but with plans to expand to places like Arizona and Georgia, groups like this could have an impact in a close election. For more on this, I'm pleased to be joined by Jonathan Salant, assistant managing editor at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Jonathan, good to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so let's start with the who, and then we'll get to the what and the why. Who are the Republicans for Harris here in Pennsylvania?
Well, in Pennsylvania, the big name is former Congressman Jim Greenwood. He was from the Philadelphia suburbs, and the Philadelphia suburbs is basically going to be one of the places the election is won or lost in the Keystone State.
So what's their purpose? Why are they doing this? I mean, ostensibly to get Harris elected, but why Republicans?
Well, we saw that even after Nikki Haley withdrew from the primary and moved for the Republican race, she still got a huge percentage of vote in the Pennsylvania primary.
Right.
And so obviously people were dissatisfied with President Trump as their choice, and they're trying to say to these folks, it's okay, you can vote for Harris this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying for a long time that those Nikki Haley voters, they're gettable voters for one campaign if they were interested. Were these disaffected Republicans also supporting Joe Biden, or was it, do you think, all sort of Nikki Haley voters?
A lot of them were just anti-Trumpers. And, you know, we saw, in fact, in the Republicans for Trump, one of the people is the former governor of New Jersey, Christie Whitman. And she spoke. You know, she was a lifelong Republican in New Jersey, which I used to cover. She was Ms. Republican. She spoke at the convention for Hillary Clinton. She spoke at the convention for Joe Biden. So you have people like that who've been anti-Trump since the beginning, and other folks who are saying, no, we have a chance to try to defeat him this year. Let's reach out to Republicans that don't like him, and let's get them to vote Democratic this year and say, it's okay to vote Democratic this one time.
So we mentioned Arizona and Georgia, Jonathan. What are Republicans for Harris planning for other battleground states?
Well, most of this is going to be a person-to-person contact to basically tell fellow Republicans, it's okay. I mean, you had some big names. Nikki Haley was one of them at the Republican convention who was anti-Trump, and now she said, I'm going to vote for Trump. It's better than the alternative. You have Chris Sununu of New Hampshire, another person, a big Haley supporter in New Hampshire, who said, I'm not going to vote Democratic, even though I don't like Trump. He's still a Republican. I'm going to vote for him. These Republicans are going, they say, you know, person to person, it's okay. I'm not going to vote for Trump. I'm going to vote for the Democrats. You can do it, too, without losing your Republican registration card.
Okay, Jonathan Salant from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thanks so much for joining us and breaking all of that down. I'm sure we'll come to you again sometime soon.
Anytime, I'll be here.
And for more on all of this, visit us at battlegroundnews.com or click on the QR code here. You can sign up for our newsletter, download our interactive swing state map, and find our social media links. And if you miss an episode, you can catch up on YouTube or through our podcast. Up next, how election security issues are playing out in North Carolina. Battleground. We'll be right back.
If you ask voters if they have faith in the election system, you'll get a mixed bag of answers.
Yes, definitely.
I think so. I've never had any reason not to.
I feel it's safe and secure. I believe it.
No.
You don't?
No.
Welcome back to Battleground. That was Morgan Fogarty of WCCB in Charlotte reporting on the issue of election security in North Carolina. In all of our swing states, these issues around voter access, registration, and ballot security remain a contentious topic. And in a close election, every battle for every vote becomes magnified. And with nearly a third of Tar Heel State voters lacking faith in the voting process, well, it just means these issues will likely continue before and after this election. Morgan, it's good to see you again. I think we have to start right there because, as you reported, nearly a third of voters in North Carolina say they lack faith in the election system. That's a staggering number. What's driving this?
So that number comes from the Commission on the Future of North Carolina Elections. And the commission co-chair, Bob Orr, tells me that he thinks this is clearly a product of the 2020 election and Donald Trump saying that the election was stolen, and then having his surrogates amplify it and some media amplifying it. So if you only get your news from one source, it becomes an echo chamber, as we know, and those false claims are reinforced. The co-chair also says that he thinks technology raises concerns with some voters because people don't know how it works. And that's part of why they formed this commission, to tell people about the system in North Carolina, to help them better understand it. And the commission is now actually traveling across the state, hosting town hall meetings where they talk about the results of their work. And they hear from people who are new to North Carolina. They say that they're surprised at how well the system here works after they learn about it. So part of changing that number, I see, is education.
Okay, so let me just clarify something you just said. Their feeling is not based on any examples of fraud. It's based on things they've heard?
Correct. It's based on what they hear, what they see on social media, what they hear candidates telling them, and what's reinforced in those parts of their lives, whether it's true or not.
So you mentioned slight improvements. What are those improvements related to?
Yeah, so the commission was clear, and the co-chairs told me this is a preliminary draft report. They're going to have more meetings to talk about it. They're going to get more input after the presidential election and release more details. But they wanted to talk about some of the problems, and campaign finance is one of them. The State Board of Elections is understaffed. And they are using software that is 20 years old, which I had no idea about. They've requested funding from the state, but it's not yet been approved by the General Assembly. And the commission was talking about how they need political leaders in our state to understand and appreciate these issues. One of the other areas for improvement they talked about was that there are 100 boards of local elections in North Carolina. There are 100 counties. Each has a director. More than half of the directors, I thought this was fascinating, have never worked a presidential election. They're new to the system. And that's because we're seeing people leave these roles. They don't want to participate in the election system because there are threats. There's distrust of the system. They're subjected to harassment. So North Carolina is struggling to recruit people to work these elections because of these issues with intimidation. And it discourages people from wanting to put themselves in those positions.
I mean, who can blame them? But that's really a shame. Let's get to voter ID. That's been a hot button topic in all of our swing states. What's the latest there on that front?
Yeah, so there's still a lot of litigation happening with voter ID in North Carolina. Our new voter ID law was in effect for primaries and municipal races, and actually there weren't too many glitches. There was a bipartisan vote from the State Board of Elections to put together some what they call sufficient alternatives for people who forget to bring their ID to the polls. So some of the examples, they'll let you go home and get it. They'll let you vote with a provisional ballot, come back with your ID. But so far, the commission says that it has found that the system has worked well. One idea that the commission has come up with is for the State Board of Elections to issue an official voting ID card. That's just an idea at this point, and it's a very long way from becoming anything concrete. But this November 5th will be the first presidential election that North Carolina requires voter ID. The proof will be in the pudding.
Morgan Fogarty from WCCB in Charlotte. Thanks as always. Speaking of former President Trump, he's rejoined Twitter, now of course called X, to coincide with a conversation on the social media platform last night with Elon Musk. We asked our swing state voters to weigh in on this and take a look at what they had to say. Battleground will be right back. Welcome back to Battleground. For those of you not accustomed to seeing us here on a Tuesday, Battleground is now airing Monday through Friday at this same time as we close in on just over 80 days until this all-important election. And our mission is simple. We focus on the voters and the issues in the 7 swing states that will decide this election: Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. And every once in a while, we get a little Schoolhouse Rock with you. And for our younger viewers, please Google that. It was awesome. But as you know, presidential elections are about one number, 270, as in 270 electoral votes. Of course, it's not actually who wins the most votes. You can take that up with the founding fathers. Each week until the election, we'll take a moment to look at the state of the race from the point of view of the only college that none of us graduated from, the Electoral College, courtesy of our friends at 270 to Win. There are 93 electoral votes up for grabs in the 7 swing states, and those 93 votes will determine who will be our next president. So here we go. These numbers are based on an aggregate of polls from 270 to Win, and as you can see before we start with our swing states, the base here is Harris 226, Trump 219. In Arizona, Donald Trump is leading by a narrow margin, which would give him the state's 11 electoral votes that immediately will put Trump in the lead at 230 to 226. In Georgia and its hefty 16 electoral votes, Trump also has a narrow lead, pushing his total to 246 over Harris's 226. Michigan, another one of the biggest prizes on election night, Kamala Harris now leads there, which closes her gap to just 5 electoral votes. To North Carolina, where Trump has been leading consistently in this race, and if that continues, that would give him 262, with Harris still at 241. Nevada is still too close to call, so for now, we won't assign any of those 6 electoral votes to either candidate. Here in Pennsylvania, a dramatic turnaround in the past 2 weeks, with Harris now leading Trump. If that holds, that catapults Kamala Harris to a very close 260 to Donald Trump's 262. And finally, in Wisconsin, a state the Democrats lost in 2016 but flipped in 2020, new polling shows Harris up there slightly, but within the margin of error. A win there would put Kamala Harris at exactly 270, or enough votes to become the first woman ever elected president of the United States. But still a long way to go. Plenty could change. Okay, phew, please no more math, at least until tomorrow. I'm Essie Cupp, and we'll see you next time on Battleground.